Hey everyone. On November 12, 2001, American Airlines Flight 587 was scheduled for a routine trip from John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York City to Las Americas International Airport in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. It was meant to be a straightforward, uneventful journey. After all, it was a familiar route for the airline, one that catered to a large Dominican population in New York, who frequently traveled back and forth between the two cities. However, this flight would become one of the most tragic aviation disasters in American history, killing all 260 people on board and 5 more on the ground. The crash of American Airlines Flight 587, just 2 months after the September 11th attacks, sent shockwaves through a nation still in mourning. As smoke rose from the wreckage in Bell Harbor, Queens, many feared the worst. Was this another terrorist attack? In a world already on edge, the crash raised immediate alarms. But as investigators dug deeper, they discovered that the cause of the crash was rooted in something very different. This disaster would unveil critical insights about flight operations, pilot training, and aircraft design, all of which would change aviation safety protocols moving forward. On that Monday morning, everything started as planned. The Airbus A300-600R, which had been in service for over a decade, was in good condition. The weather was clear, with only light winds and good visibility. The captain and the first officer were both experienced pilots, with thousands of flight hours under their belts. The passengers, many of them excited to visit family in the Dominican Republic, were settling in for the flight. At around 9 a.m., the aircraft began taxiing towards the runway. Flight 587 was scheduled to take off from runway 31L, one of JFK's busiest runways. At the time, air traffic was steady, and just before Flight 587's turn to depart, a Japan Airlines Boeing 747 had taken off ahead of them. This is an important detail, as the wake turbulence generated by the much larger 747 would later play a critical role in the tragic events that followed. Wake turbulence is a well-known phenomenon in aviation. It's the swirling air left behind by an aircraft as it moves through the sky. Larger, heavier planes, like the 747, create more intense turbulence, which can be dangerous to smaller planes flying behind them if they get too close. Pilots are trained to handle wake turbulence, and air traffic controllers typically ensure that enough distance is kept between departing aircraft to avoid such hazards. On this day, however, while the distance was deemed safe by air traffic control standards, the subsequent events would show how a combination of factors led to the deadly outcome. At approximately 9:14 a.m., Flight 587 took off. The aircraft climbed normally at first, but just 2 minutes into the flight, things started to go wrong. The plane encountered wake turbulence from the departing 747. While turbulence itself is not uncommon, the response to it by the first officer, who was flying the aircraft at the time, would prove to be fatal. According to the National Transportation Safety Board and NTSB investigation, the first officer reacted aggressively to the turbulence. Instead of making small adjustments to stabilize the aircraft, he applied several abrupt and excessive rudder inputs. The rudder is the part of the aircraft's tail that helps steer it from left to right. However, unlike the ailerons, which control the aircraft's roll, the rudder should be used with great care, especially at high speeds during takeoff. Unfortunately, the first officer's excessive use of the rudder put immense stress on the aircraft's vertical stabilizer, the large fin-like structure on the tail that keeps the plane stable. In a matter of seconds, the repeated rudder movements caused the vertical stabilizer to snap off completely. This was a catastrophic failure. Without the stabilizer, the aircraft became uncontrollable. The plane rolled violently to the left and then to the right, its wings flapping uncontrollably as the pilot struggled to regain control. Passengers, likely confused and terrified, would have had little time to comprehend what was happening as the plane rapidly descended toward the ground. At 9:16 a.m., just 103 seconds after takeoff, American Airlines Flight 587 crashed into the Bell Harbor neighborhood of Queens, New York. The impact was devastating. The plane tore through houses, engulfing them in flames and sending plumes of smoke high into the air. All 260 people on board were killed instantly, and 5 more people on the ground lost their lives as well. The crash site was a scene of utter devastation, with debris scattered over several blocks. As news of the crash spread, many feared that it was another terrorist attack. After all, New York was still reeling from the events of September 11th, just 2 months prior. The sight of smoke rising over the city again was enough to trigger panic and dread. However, it didn't take long for authorities to rule out terrorism. This was a tragic accident, not an act of malice. In the days that followed, the NTSB launched a full-scale investigation into the crash. Investigators worked tirelessly to piece together what had happened in those brief, chaotic moments after takeoff. The discovery that the vertical stabilizer had separated from the aircraft was both shocking and concerning. Such a failure is extremely rare in aviation, and the NTSB knew that understanding why it happened would be key to preventing future disasters. One of the first things investigators looked into was the design of the Airbus A300-600R. The Airbus A300 series was one of the first wide-body jets introduced into commercial service, and it had a strong safety record overall. However, the vertical stabilizer on this particular model was made of composite materials, rather than the traditional aluminum used in most aircraft. Composite materials are lighter and more resistant to corrosion, but there were questions about their ability to withstand the kinds of stresses that the stabilizer experienced during Flight 587. The investigation revealed that the composite material itself was not the issue. The vertical stabilizer was designed to withstand significant forces, far beyond what would typically be encountered during normal flight. However, the repeated and aggressive rudder inputs made by the first officer created forces that were well beyond what the aircraft was designed to handle. Essentially, the plane was pushed beyond its structural limits, leading to the catastrophic failure of the tail section. But why did the first officer make such extreme rudder inputs in the first place? This question became a focal point of the investigation. The NTSB discovered that the first officer, while experienced, may not have fully understood the proper use of the rudder in high-stress situations. In fact, the investigation revealed a broader issue within the aviation industry at the time. Many pilots were not adequately trained on how to respond to wake turbulence and the appropriate use of the rudder at high speeds. In the aftermath of the crash, American Airlines and other carriers re-evaluated their pilot training programs. New guidelines were implemented to ensure that pilots were better equipped to handle wake turbulence and avoid the kind of overcorrections that led to the crash of Flight 587. Additionally, Airbus made modifications to the design of their aircraft, reinforcing the vertical stabilizer to withstand even greater forces. The crash of Flight 587 also highlighted the importance of understanding the limitations of composite materials in aircraft design. While composites have many advantages, they behave differently than traditional materials like aluminum under stress. This led to further research and development in the use of composite materials in aviation, ensuring that future aircraft would be even safer. For the families of the victims, the crash was a heartbreaking tragedy. Many of the passengers were of Dominican descent, traveling home to visit family for the holidays. In the Dominican Republic, the loss was deeply felt, and memorials were held both there and in New York City to honor those who lost their lives. To this day, a memorial stands in Bell Harbor, a solemn reminder of the lives lost and the tragedy that unfolded that day. In aviation history, the crash of American Airlines Flight 587 serves as a stark reminder of the complex and often unforgiving nature of flight. While modern aircraft are incredibly safe, with numerous redundancies built in to prevent accidents, human error and the limits of design can still lead to disaster. However, each tragedy brings with it valuable lessons, and the changes implemented in the wake of Flight 587 have undoubtedly made the skies safer for everyone. Thank you so much for watching and following along. I share many more plane crashes from past to present, just like this one. If you found the video informative, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Also, I recommend turning on the notification bell so you'll get notified immediately when I upload a new video.